Hi there, this is 6 Minute Reviews, and in this video, we will be, there we go. We'll be looking at how to answer multiple choice questions or MCQs in AP Literature, but this also applies for any English class. Now, original channel was going to have 6-minute videos, but now it's not, but I just don't need to change the name, so sorry if this isn't 6 minutes. Okay, so there's 7 tips that I'll be going over, and I hope they help, and at the end we'll have a final review that you may want to write down the overall points that I went over. So here's the first tip. You need to make sure that you've read the passage fully. Sorry for the typo, not reader. I don't know what happened there, but sometimes you might be tempted to skim over it if you have a time limit and you feel pressured. But it's important to understand the full meaning of the passage before you get to the questions. It would be better to have read the passage fully and then kind of went fast through the questions than going fast through the passage and then slower through the questions. Although it still is important to understand what the question is asking. But you're going to probably miss all the questions if you don't understand what the passage means. That's the main thing that you're looking for. You may have skimmed slightly, which is okay at first, but you'll go back later, which we'll talk about. The second tip is to read the question at least 2 times. This is important because you might miss what the question is actually asking, and that will make you get it wrong. Sometimes there's important details like not, all, or none that completely alter what your answer would be. So that's important. You need to make sure that you have read it fully and you understand what it's asking. The third tip is you need to not assume. So just because you read something, it's okay to come up with your own assumptions of what the author is saying, but you should only answer a question with an answer that could be explained by something in the passage, meaning evidence. Here's an example. If you've read The Story of an Hour, which you may have, if you haven't, that's okay, but it's a short story about a woman who gets news that her husband died, and then she's really sad, but then she realizes she's free from the duties of a female gender role, and then she dies because she had a heart attack because she realizes her husband wasn't dead. But how does Miss Mallard feel after she achieves her freedom? So basically, if you've read it, you know that she all of a sudden was overcame with a happy feeling, and that's what it says in there, so you would choose euphoric, meaning happy. There is evidence to prove that. You couldn't say spiritually cleansed because there's nothing that says something about that. Sure, you could assume that, but there's nothing that says anything about that, so you shouldn't choose that. So if you say it seems like, maybe it is, I think that, then it's probably not right. But if you say, I think that it's this because, you need to have a because, or say, I know this, then it probably is the answer. So remember, you need to make sure that there's something in the passage that justifies what you choose. Tip number 4 is always go back and reference the text if it's mentioned in the question. It's supposed to say question, sorry. So if you have a question that says, in paragraph 4, it says blank, and it doesn't matter what paragraph it is, but if it happens to mention something, you need to go back and read that before you go and answer the question, because maybe there's something you missed, because you may have been slightly skimming it or thinking about something else while you were reading it, so that's important to do. Tip 5, this is maybe the most important of all. You need to eliminate the obvious wrong answers. This may seem obvious, but sometimes people just don't do that, and then their mind kind of gets clogged with confusion. But the questions will seem way simpler if you just eliminate a couple of the options that you know aren't right, because there's usually 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 out of the 5 that you'll get that are completely wrong, and then there's just about 2 or 3 that may seem possible. So we're going to look at an example of a question that you could have. Well, actually, this is a very overly exaggerated option, as you'll soon see, about the story of an hour. So an example question is, what will Miss Mallard do after she realizes that she can live for herself? Will she travel to Chicago and do some sightseeing? Will she complete activities that she could not previously endure? Will she break down with some rad disco skills for the Richards? Will she give her sister Josephine a haircut? Or will she go to talk to her sister about her new joy that she has? Obviously, your answer choices will be more complex. It would be a very strange instance if you had something about rad disco skills on the college board exam, but this is just an example. So let's look at each answer choice and see why or why not we would eliminate it. Choice A, we can eliminate traveling to Chicago to do some sightseeing. Why? Well, we already went over this. There's no evidence in the text that says she wants to go to Chicago. The city of Chicago is not mentioned once in the story, so there's absolutely no reason you would believe that. But the only reason someone would choose this answer is if they did not read the passage fully, which goes back to tip one of why you should do that, and then they just assume that because it maybe sounds like an answer, but if you actually read it, you would know that there's nothing about that. So that's why. Choice B would be the correct answer in this case because we do see that she's very happy and now she can live for herself, meaning she will do anything that she wants to do now that she doesn't have the duties of the female gender role. And we can see that Kate Chopin is the author of this, and that's what she says. Choice C, break down with some rad disco skills. Well, obviously this is wrong. Even if you didn't read it, you'd probably think that's not an answer. There's no evidence that says Miss Mallard wants to do the disco for the Richards. For one thing, it's also important to look at historical context, which we'll talk about more in tips 6 and 7. But this was written in 1894, and you're always given that little paragraph that talks about who the writer is and when they wrote it and their background. And yeah, there was no disco then, and no, Kate Chopin never did the disco. That's a picture of Kate Chopin that's obviously edited because there was, for one thing, no video that could be like that, and also, I don't think she would do that, even if it did exist. Choice D is give her sister Josephine a haircut. Once again, this is obviously wrong. We could eliminate that, because, once again, there's no evidence that says she wants to give her sister a haircut. But someone that didn't read the passage may think, oh, maybe she had dreams of being a hairstylist, and maybe that is what she was going to do. But that's why it's important to read it, because you may be more confused, and it will be harder to eliminate an option if you don't know for sure if it said anything about that. So that's why you have to fully read it, because if this was a strange short story, then maybe there wasn't somehow a way that would be the answer, but not in this case. Choice E is go talk to her sister about a new joy. Well, of course, maybe she would do that eventually, but there's nothing that says anything about that, so that would make this wrong. So it's not about assuming in AP literature or any English class for the purpose of multiple choice questions, because you just need to use the evidence to answer your questions. That's the main thing. So, an overview, we could automatically rule out, if you read this fully, let's just think of two examples. So if you didn't read this, if you just happened to be a careless student that didn't read it at all and just went for the questions right away, probably the only one you would rule out is C, because that doesn't seem right. But if you did read it, you could rule out A, C, and D. So you're left with B and E that could be possible answers if you did read it. But if you know that you have to use evidence to answer a question, then you would know that it's B. Tip number 6 is use what you've learned about in English over the years. Try to gather all of your knowledge about literary devices and all of that, and think about few. Hopefully, that's the sound you'll make if you get the question right. And that's an acronym. P is point of view. So think about the point of view of the author. In this case, Kate Chopin, her goal is to make readers understand the um, costs of gender roles and its effects on society and how it should be removed, which it was eventually. And then historical context. This isn't exactly the date, more of just the time period. So the time period was the Victorian period, and that once again is in the time period of which um, finally the gender roles that were unnecessary and extreme were eliminated eventually. And then E, you need to think about the explanation of the plot structure. Why would Kate Chopin write that Miss Mallard dies? Like, why? Um, that's to emphasize the reality that it's not just a perfect story for women at the time, and they struggled, and that's the reason why the plot structure was like that. That will help you answer the questions better. And then you also can think about when it was written. That kind of ties in with age, but once again, just looking at the date helps. The last tip is if you don't know a word, this is just kind of a simple thing. You usually can't look it up, especially not on the exam unless you happen to take it in 2020, but I don't think you would be looking at this video if you watched it in 2020 because it's 2021 when I made this. Instead, you can think about the composition of a word, meaning the prefix and the suffix. Sometimes you just won't know what the word is, but you don't have to understand what every single word is in a passage. It's okay if there's a sentence or two that you didn't understand what it means, because you're not asked about every part of it. But if you happen to be asked about something that you don't know, then just look at the prefix or the suffix. For example, if it has dis at the beginning, even if you don't know what the word means, it usually has a negative connotation to it, like dislike or disapprove. And words that end in ly usually mean completed in that way, so happily or slyly. Um, so if you had some strange word that had ly and you didn't know what it meant, you could at least know that it means that wasn't completed in that way, and that may help you eliminate a couple options. So to review, you need to fully read the passage, fully understand what the question is asking, make sure that there's evidence to justify your answer, reread the text if it's referenced in a question, eliminate the obvious, use few, look at word compositions to understand a word you don't know. That will be it for this video. Thanks for watching, and be sure to check out more videos soon to come.